Welcome to the AgNow Weather Report. Matt Makens here, supporting the Air Force Academy. They're graduating just down the road from me. If you're the F-16s, you know what's happening. But congratulations to all the new lieutenants. Beautiful weather for their graduation. Here's a headline for you. The drought timeline, going back since 2000, the amount of drought, or the drought footprint, if you will. What's the headline here? Well, we have currently the lowest amount of drought across the U.S. in about 4 years. April 2020 was the last time we had drought levels this low. Remember this chunk of time? That was our La Niña, our rare 3-year La Niña. This period was also following an El Nino. We're following an El Nino now. We're headed back toward La Niña, so you can kind of get where I'm going with this. Yeah, the drought footprint is the lowest in several years now, but with La Niña kicking in, we're going to see the drought numbers start to increase later this year. Here's a look at the map overall. So again, from a footprint standpoint, we have the lowest drought in several years. However, if you're in central or western Kansas, southern New Mexico, parts of Texas, that headline doesn't matter to you. You're in a really bad drought, and that drought will be getting worse as we dry out progressively this summer. Not much of a monsoon for later this year for New Mexico, so the drought numbers will be climbing. So let's, I guess, celebrate, if you will, right now, and then we'll commiserate, or whatever we want to call it, later on this year. Other hazards on the way. We have a risk for quite a bit of heat, some wind, some fire danger there in Wyoming and Montana. A lot of heat for the west. We're talking about, in some cases, record temperatures, but just abnormally hot for the time of year. We have these pockets of rain and some isolated flooding across the Midwest and the upper Midwest, as well as out in New England. Some of the heat in Florida does continue, as well as parts of Texas. And with heat, not much water on the way, those drought numbers will be climbing for Florida, for Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Speaking of Oklahoma and Kansas, as well as Texas, we have a risk of severe thunderstorms there. Again, this is Thursday when this video was recorded, but just know that you can always find the severity or the probability of having severe weather for your area. It's really best to follow the Storm Prediction Center, or on my Twitter feed. I try to put these maps out daily since it changes every day, but it can give you at least a little heads up on the severity of the storms that may be coming your way. Let's talk about those soils again. Kind of already alluded to the drought impact here. Where do we see some issues over the coming week to 10 days? I anticipate the drought to increase here across the northern high plains, a combination of warmth, strong winds that can dry things out quickly. So Wyoming, Montana, we may see the drought numbers increase over the next couple of weeks. We'll also have to watch out for western Kansas, although there is some rain and thunder on the way. Numbers throughout New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Utah, parts of Colorado likely increasing, as well as Texas and Florida. We'll likely see drought changes there. And again, talking about drought growth, not drought suppression. Where we may see some improvements would be parts of Iowa, the upper Midwest there, and in Minnesota and Wisconsin, perhaps in parts of Nebraska too, but that's a bit of a stretch. Let's take a look at the timeline here of the thunderstorms and the complexes as they move across the country. There's severe weather action here across the central U.S. as we go Thursday, Friday into Saturday. That storm system continues to push off to the east, and another one develops over the lee side of the Rockies, basically on I-25, and then they move east. As we look to the northwest, a period of pretty frequent weather, pretty frequent rainfall on the way. They're actually going to be in a surplus area for water there, but it kind of dries up by the time it reaches Montana and Wyoming. For a lot of Canada, quite a bit of water is headed through there. Remember, they're well into plant and grazing season as well. So we have a number of these thunderstorm complexes to move through over the next week to 10 days. What are some of the moisture totals we're looking at as these storms pass on through? Most impressively from basically, I'll just use kind of the ambiguous line of I-35 as it snakes southward. If you're along I-35 or east of, you're going to have the higher totals. And again, that's not a perfect fit, but it's pretty close. We have some water here for eastern Colorado, parts of northeastern New Mexico, parts of western Kansas, Oklahoma, and the Texas Panhandle. But by and large, it's not a great deal of water. At least it's something, but it's not going to beat the drought down, I'm afraid. Let's zoom that map in a little bit. So we have Minneapolis, here's Omaha, we have Kansas City, Oklahoma City, down toward Dallas, and east up toward Little Rock. Those are going to be the bullseyes of 2s, 3s, 4s. Isolated thunderstorms could produce 6, 7, 8s. I work for a fella down here in southeastern Oklahoma, and he's picking up, 6 inches per round, every 3 days or so. A lot of water there. But we're not really spreading it to the west of I-35. In some isolated cases, yes, but mostly confined to the east. Let's take a look at the weekly outlooks. We have some warmth there across the west and south, but what about moisture? What can we expect over the next few weeks? So weekly chunks, week 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going all the way into late June. We have the concentration of moisture here for the next week. As you guessed it, right where I showed you. As we look at the second week, we're spreading some moisture out from the Texas Panhandle to Colorado. Fingers crossed on that. That area really needs that water. Here's the 13th to 20th of June. Pockets of thunderstorm activity. We may try to help out Montana and Wyoming, Nebraska, the Dakotas with some water. Otherwise, it's dry throughout. And then the last week of June here, trying to get some water back into Alberta. A lot of the Rockies there will catch some rain, perhaps a little bit of snow too, but mostly in the form of rain as we're so warm. We'll also be watching out as, by and large, the late part of June, we're ramping up in yes, we're already in severe weather season, but severe weather in terms of hurricanes. As you go June, July, August, you start to reach the peak in the hurricane activity. And right now, we'll have to watch the tropics. We may see tropical storm impacts or hurricane impacts on the Gulf Coast states. You're not going to see that reflected here, but just know that as we go throughout June, we may have to be monitoring for a storm or two that could spread all that rainfall, that flooding threat to the south or southeastern U.S. Well, that's this week's AgNow Weather Report. We'll see you next time.